This segment brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook. Let us help feed your family.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer visiting with Candy Thomas. Candy is with NRCS. Today she is manning the Rainfall Simulator. And I got to tell you, Candy, I've seen these rainfall simulations for 20 years, and every time I see them, I am just so astounded. Can you kind of help people understand what the demonstration looks like?
Okay, so first what we do is we run an aggregate stability test, which kind of shows the difference between soils that are tilled versus soils that are, say, in a no-till system. And those aggregates are formed by generally three things: plant roots, which entangle and enmesh the soils. And then we've got bacteria that have these polysaccharides. They're like sticky, almost like a honey type of substance that sticks and holds soil particles together. And then we also have arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and they form this hyphal net, kind of like a hairnet, that entangles and enmeshes soil similar to plant roots. And they also release this glycoprotein, which is kind of a hydrophobic coating on the outside of the soil colloids that helps stick and glue and hold those soils together. So when you till a soil, you break up that hyphal connection, you break up a lot of the plant roots, and you destroy some of that glycoprotein on that soil surface. So then we move from and show the difference between the tilled soil and the no-till soil. And generally, they go through this process that we call slaking, and that's that ability of the soil to stay together. So as it's a physics process. So as the water rushes into that either the soil ped, the glues either hold together or they start to break down and fall apart. The no-till soil holds together, and you may see some larger pieces, they call it slake off, which is fall off on the sides of those peds and sink to the bottom. Or you may see total dispersion of that soil clod. So a clod is a man-made object from tillage. And so the tilled soil, that clod usually breaks apart, and you'll see all of that soil in that column down to the particle size. So we'll have sand grains at the bottom of the cylinder. You'll see the silt kind of right above that, but still in suspension. And then the total cylinder itself will stay completely, with the soil, the clay particles kind of hanging in suspension, and they'll stay there for quite a while. So then we move them over to the Rainfall Simulator itself, and we put in a pan. We cut directly from the field, from a farmer's field. So we'll cut out a pan of no-till. Then we'll go to a tilled field, and generally we can't cut it because it's so loose. We end up just shoveling it into the pan carefully and putting it kind of in the layers that we got it out of the field. And then we also have a pan of what we call Mother Nature's Best, or native rangeland, which has a lot of good diversity, usually has probably the best porosity of any of those soils. And then we also, I usually like to get either an overgrazed pan, or in this case we got alfalfa, which is very similar to overgrazing because we have, there's three different things that impact the amount of aggregation even in native rangeland, and that's that intensity, how many animals you're putting on the land, how many times you're mowing it, the duration, how long you're leaving the animals there on the land, or how far down you're cutting it, and then also the frequency. How many times are you going back and regrazing that area, or how many times are you going back and recutting that? So in the case of alfalfa, generally we get between 4 or 5, sometimes 6 cuttings, depending on how much time there is throughout the year. And removing that amount of carbon that root exudates is what builds and helps maintain the soil microbial communities in that soil. Depending upon how many times you cut it, it's hard for those to rebound because the root has to take all that carbon and push it back up the shoots and try to grow new roots instead of feeding that soil life like what we get within a no-till pan with living roots throughout the year if we have cover crops. So what we do is we turn on the rain, and we have an oscillator, and that oscillator swings back and forth, and it puts on about an inch and a half of rain in about a 15-20 minute period. And so in the front side we have these jugs that collect all the water that runs off, and then right behind that are our infiltration jugs. So all of the pans are perforated, they have holes in them, and they have a funnel that funnels it all so that it runs right into that jug. So then we compare those different managements, the no-till versus the tilled, the native rangeland versus the overgrazed pasture, or the alfalfa hayland. and just look and see how much runoff versus infiltration we get and how effective that rainfall is. And that's really what it's all about, is, having effective rainfall. And I listened to your documentary that you were on, When the Well Runs Dry, which was really very profound, and you stated it plain and simply and just exactly the way it is. It's all about effective rainfall. And out here in the semi-arid West, when you're past this 100th meridian, you've got to get every single drop you can into the ground. Because if we start to lose it and we don't have this cover to keep that evaporation from happening, then none of our rainfall is effective. We've lost it essentially.
Visiting with Candy Thomas, she's with NRCS. This is Kyle Bauer reporting.